I was sitting in the back of the courtroom that day, waiting for the next case. It was supposed to be routine. A minor dispute over property damage. Nothing unusual. But then he walked in, a young teenager, maybe 14, wearing a navy blazer that looked a size too big and clutching a worn leather folder like it held his entire future. No lawyer. No parent in sight. The bailiff called the case, Case 486, Jamal Richardson vs. Metro Auto Group. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, peered over her glasses. "Mr. Richardson, where is your representation?" Jamal cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I'll be representing myself." That drew a few smirks from the courtroom, and even the judge allowed herself a brief sigh. "You're 14, she said flatly. "You're not an attorney." He didn't flinch. "I understand. But I've prepared my case thoroughly. I've read the court's guidelines, and I respectfully ask for permission to present." The judge narrowed her eyes. "This is a formal hearing, not a school debate. I suggest you sit quietly and let the court proceed." He paused, gripping his folder tighter. "But I am the plaintiff, Your Honor." "I said enough," she snapped, raising her gavel. That's when everything changed. The moment the judge raised her gavel, the courtroom fell into that thick silence, the kind that hums in your ears. People shifted in their seats. Some shook their heads, already writing Jamal off as just another kid who didn't know his place. But Jamal didn't sit down. Instead, he opened his folder slowly, carefully, like he knew the exact page he needed. His hands didn't shake. His voice, though soft, was clear. "Your Honor," he began again, more firmly this time, "under Section 43.7 of the Juvenile Civil Procedures Code, minors may represent themselves in small claims court when no criminal charges are involved and when they are the direct party affected. That's me." The gavel paused midair. He took a breath and continued, "I submitted my motion and supporting documents 2 weeks ago. They were signed for at the clerk's desk. I have the receipt." He held it up for the room to see, a crumpled but legible printout with the court's stamp. The courtroom shifted again, but this time people leaned forward. Even the bailiff looked mildly impressed. The judge slowly lowered her gavel. Her expression tightened. "That doesn't make you qualified." Jamal didn't blink. "It makes me eligible. The law doesn't say I have to be qualified, only that I have the legal right to speak on my own behalf in this setting. And that's all I'm asking." You could almost hear the air leave the judge's lungs. It wasn't disrespectful. It wasn't dramatic. It was exactly what the law allowed, and everyone in the room knew it. She adjusted her glasses, eyes locked on Jamal. "Very well," she muttered, reluctantly. "Proceed." Jamal nodded once, then flipped to the next page. And just like that, in front of an entire courtroom full of doubt, the boy who'd been silenced, shut her down with nothing but quiet confidence and the law. Jamal stepped forward, placing his folder on the plaintiff's table like it was a sacred artifact. He didn't stumble. He didn't stutter. Every move was deliberate, the kind of calm that made grown attorneys look twice. He began, "On March 12th, I took my bike to Metro Auto Group for a tire alignment. It's not a car dealership issue, they offer repairs for electric bikes now. My mom saved up for that bike. It was my only way to get to school, tutoring, and my part-time job." He pointed to a printed photo of the bike, now twisted and mangled. "When I picked it up later that evening, the brakes were completely disengaged. I didn't know until I was halfway down Millstone Avenue and couldn't stop. I hit a loading dock. Dislocated shoulder. 2 fractured ribs." A few people in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably. Jamal paused, letting it settle. "I have here the invoice from Metro," he continued, sliding it across the table. "They listed the bike as serviced and safety checked. I also have statements from a certified technician who inspected it after the crash. He found stripped screws in the braking system and a mismatched cable, a part that doesn't even belong to my model. The judge looked down at the evidence. Her tone softened, but she was still guarded. And what is it exactly that you're asking the court to do? I'm not asking for sympathy, Jamal said plainly. I'm asking for accountability. For Metro Auto Group to reimburse the cost of the bike, cover the hospital bills not included in our insurance, and issue a formal apology acknowledging their negligence. He held up one more paper, a modest, typed list of his demands. I've totaled the damages at $1,842.36. I'm not inflating it. That's the real number. And I've already waived the emotional distress part. I'm not here for that. The courtroom was completely still. Even the defense attorney, a man in his 40s who clearly thought this would be an open-and-shut case, was now sitting up straight, flipping through his own notes. The judge glanced down at the documents, then looked up at Jamal. For the first time, her tone didn't carry a trace of condescension. Defendant, she said quietly, do you have a response? The defense attorney, Mr. Grayson, cleared his throat as he stood. He'd clearly underestimated the situation, probably figured he was just going to breeze through a case against a teenager and be done before lunch. But now, the entire courtroom was staring at him like he was the one on trial. He straightened his tie and forced a smile. Your Honor, while we sympathize with the young man's experience, we maintain that Metro Auto Group followed standard procedure. The receipt he provided states that the client assumed responsibility upon pickup. Furthermore, the service technician who worked on the bike is a certified mechanic, Jamal cut in politely but firmly. Certified for cars. Not electric bikes. I called the manufacturer directly and confirmed it. Would you like to hear the recorded call? The judge lifted an eyebrow. Is that true, Mr. Grayson? Grayson hesitated, then shifted uncomfortably. I'd have to verify that, Your Honor. You'll want to, she said, clearly unimpressed. Jamal continued, also, Your Honor, the waiver of liability that's printed on the receipt is a generic one. According to State Business Code 18.6, waivers do not protect businesses from negligence or improper servicing outside the technician's certified area of expertise. He handed a highlighted printout of the statute to the bailiff, who passed it up to the bench. The judge scanned it silently. A few seconds passed. Then she looked up with a different kind of expression, not amused, not irritated, something closer to genuine curiosity. Where did you learn all this? She asked. Jamal shrugged lightly. The public library has case law databases. I just read everything I could. I wanted to be ready. The room was dead quiet. A woman behind me whispered, this kid's sharper than half the lawyers I've seen in here. Mr. Grayson looked like he wanted to disappear. He tried to salvage what little ground he had left. Regardless, Your Honor, he muttered, we'd like to request a continuance to prepare a more thorough defense. But before the judge could respond, Jamal stepped in again, respectfully, but without hesitation. Objection, Your Honor. This is a delay tactic. They've had 3 weeks since the summons was issued, and I sent them my evidence packet the same day I filed. I even included a tracking number. The judge paused, then slowly nodded. Motion for continuance is denied, she said, her voice ringing louder now. This court will proceed. Jamal had just outmaneuvered a professional attorney, in open court, using nothing but research, facts, and sheer preparation. And the courtroom? You could feel the tide turning. The judge sat back in her chair, studying Jamal like she was seeing him for the first time. No longer a kid fumbling where he didn't belong, now, a legitimate voice demanding to be heard. She turned to the defense table. Mr. Grayson, unless you have something substantial to present, we're moving to closing remarks. Grayson hesitated again. You could see the struggle on his face, caught between pride and panic. But he finally nodded and sat down without saying another word. Jamal took one final step toward the bench, cleared his throat, and began his closing. Your Honor, I didn't come here today to prove I'm smart. Or to embarrass anyone. I came here because what happened wasn't right, and because I thought if I laid out the facts, if I trusted the system, someone would listen. He paused, his voice steady but filled with something deeper now, something personal. I know what it feels like to be ignored. To walk into a room and be dismissed before you even open your mouth. But I also know what accountability looks like. And that's all I'm asking for. Not favors. Not sympathy. Just fairness. The courtroom was completely silent. Even the judge's assistant had stopped typing. Every eye was on Jamal. He finished calmly, "Thank you for your time, Your Honor." Then he sat down, no mic drop, no dramatic flair. Just the quiet confidence of someone who knew he'd done everything he could. The judge looked down at her notes, then back at Jamal. And in that moment, something shifted in her voice. "Mr. Richardson," she said, carefully choosing her words, "you've presented your case with clarity, precision, and a level of poise well beyond your years. This court commends your preparation, and your restraint." She glanced over at Grayson, then continued. "Judgment is hereby entered in favor of the plaintiff. Metro Auto Group is ordered to pay the full amount of $1,842.36 in damages." The courtroom erupted. People who had doubted him moments earlier now whispered in awe. A few even applauded before the bailiff gave them a warning glance. Jamal didn't smile. He just nodded, quietly gathering his papers. He hadn't come for applause. He came for justice. As the courtroom emptied, people lingered, not out of obligation, but because they had just witnessed something rare. A teenager, barely out of middle school, had walked into a space built for professionals and not only held his ground, he commanded it. Reporters were already outside by the time Jamal stepped through the double doors. Word had traveled fast. A local journalist from Channel 8 leaned in with a mic. "Young man, how does it feel to win your case today without legal representation?" Jamal looked surprised, almost caught off guard. "I'm just glad the truth mattered more than titles." He didn't say much more. No speeches. No camera theatrics. He gave a polite thank you and walked away. But by the next morning, his story had already taken over local news. The headlines read, "Teen legal prodigy takes down auto giant, judge rules in his favor." 14-year-old outsmarts defense attorney in courtroom showdown. Clips of his testimony were circulating on social media. Thousands of people shared the footage, calling him everything from "the future of justice" to "a reminder that preparation beats privilege." But not everyone was impressed in the same way. At Metro Auto Group, corporate management went into full damage control mode. Their phones rang non-stop with customer cancellations. The technician who had worked on Jamal's bike was placed on immediate leave. By Wednesday, their PR team had issued a public apology. "We acknowledge the court's decision and offer our sincere apologies to Mr. Richardson. We are conducting a full internal review of our repair protocols and technician certifications to ensure this does not happen again." But the apology didn't change what people were talking about. It wasn't just about faulty brakes or legal loopholes, it was about a boy who walked into a courtroom alone and left with the respect of a city. At his school, Jamal was met with a standing ovation in the hallway. Even teachers who rarely spoke to him now shook his hand. A local law firm sent him a scholarship application that same afternoon, unsolicited. And at home? His mom cried when he handed her the check. Not because of the money, but because of what it represented. "You didn't just win a case, baby," she said, hugging him tight. "You changed something." And he had. Not just in the courtroom, but in every room where people ever doubted someone because of how young they looked, how quietly they spoke, or how quickly they were dismissed. Jamal Richardson didn't raise his voice. He raised the bar. By the end of the week, Jamal's story had crossed state lines. It started with a clip posted by a courtroom observer, just 30 seconds of him calmly citing the statute that shut the judge down. But the caption? Judge tries to silence 14-year-old, then he schools her with the law. The video blew up. Within 24 hours, it had over 1.2 million views on TikTok and was trending on X, formerly Twitter. Verified accounts began weighing in, lawyers, educators, influencers, even a few retired judges. A public defender in Chicago wrote, "This kid just did what half my clients wish they could. Calm, legal precision, and zero ego. We need to support kids like Jamal." Hashtags like #JusticeWithJamal and #BoyVersusSystem started trending. Soon after, podcasts picked up the story. Then national TV. CNN ran a short segment. Even The Daily Show did a light-hearted recap, complete with dramatic reenactments of the moment he quoted the law and the courtroom fell silent. But it wasn't just entertainment. A youth legal aid organization called Voice for Minors launched a campaign in his name, pushing for better access to public legal education in schools. They reached out to Jamal directly. By the second week, 3 law schools had contacted his mother. They weren't offering admission, not yet, but they were pledging mentorship, early programs, and scholarships. One dean called him the most promising legal mind under 18 I've ever seen. And Jamal? He kept showing up to school like normal. Same hoodie. Same quiet presence in the back row of class. When asked how he felt about all the attention, he just shrugged. "I didn't do it for fame," he said in one local interview. "I did it because I had to. That's what the law is supposed to be, something that helps when you need it most." And somehow, that quote became even bigger than the verdict. It was printed on shirts. On protest signs. On school bulletin boards. The law is supposed to help when you need it most. 2 weeks after the verdict, Jamal's life felt like it was still spinning. News vans occasionally parked outside his school. Strangers mailed letters to his house. A bookstore downtown even asked him to sign a copy of the state legal code, which he politely declined. But one afternoon, something entirely different happened. He was sitting at the kitchen table, working through algebra homework, when his mom's phone rang. She answered casually, until her eyes widened and she mouthed to Jamal, "It's Washington." Not someone from Washington. Washington itself. The caller was from the Office of Civic Engagement and Education, a White House-affiliated initiative. They'd seen the viral videos, read the reports, and they weren't calling to offer applause. They were calling with an invitation. Jamal was formally requested to speak at a national youth summit in D.C. Not just attend, but deliver the keynote on legal literacy and the next generation. He thought it was a prank. It wasn't. A week later, he was flying to Washington with his mom, wearing his one nice blazer and carrying that same old folder, now worn at the edges but still packed with his handwritten notes and court documents. When he walked onto that massive stage, standing before hundreds of students, lawyers, politicians, and educators, you'd expect nerves. But Jamal stood the same way he had in that courtroom, calm, collected, ready. He told his story, not like a celebrity, but like someone still trying to solve a problem. "We teach kids how to memorize laws," he said. "But we don't always teach them how to use the law. That has to change." When he finished, the entire auditorium rose in a standing ovation. Some adults had tears in their eyes. One senator later said it was the most meaningful 10 minutes I've heard in that room in years. By the next day, Jamal's speech was trending again, only this time, it wasn't about a local courtroom victory. It was about reform. State legislators in 3 different states introduced bills proposing legal literacy electives in middle and high schools, directly inspired by Jamal's story. One was even nicknamed the Richardson Bill. And Jamal? He didn't chase the spotlight. He went back to school, back to his books. But now, everywhere he went, people looked at him a little differently. Not just as a boy who knew the law, but as the boy who reminded the system what the law was for. The courtroom was packed again. Only this time, the boy wasn't the one nervously standing before the bench, he was sitting behind it. Judge Jamal Richardson. At just 24, he'd made history, the youngest ever to be appointed to a juvenile civil bench in his state. It was ceremonial, of course, but it was also symbolic. The kid who once had to beg a judge just to speak had now become the person who listens when no one else will. People often asked him how it happened, how he rose so fast. He always gave the same answer: I never chased power. I chased understanding. Law school had been a whirlwind. Full scholarship. Internships with civil rights attorneys. A bar exam passed on the first try. Offers from prestigious firms, all of which he turned down to return home and work in public defense. But the story that still followed him wasn't about his GPA or courtroom wins. It was that case. The one from when he was 14. The one where a judge tried to silence him, and he responded not with anger, but with knowledge. Now, every week in his courtroom, Jamal kept a framed copy of the Juvenile Civil Procedures Code on his desk, the exact same section he quoted all those years ago. He never forgot where he started. And he never forgot who was watching. One day, a nervous kid, not much older than he had been, stood before him, fidgeting with a notebook. I don't have a lawyer, sir. I tried to read the law online, but it's a little confusing. I just want to explain. Judge Jamal leaned forward, eyes kind but firm. You don't need to impress me, he said. You just need to speak the truth. Take your time. And in that moment, the cycle came full circle. Because Jamal wasn't just there to hand down verdicts. He was there to make sure no voice, especially the quiet ones, ever got shut down again. Years had passed since that unforgettable moment in court, when a 14-year-old boy, armed with nothing but a folder, his voice, and the truth, had stood toe-to-toe with a system built to overlook him. But Jamal Richardson had done more than win a single case. He changed everything. After becoming a judge, Jamal didn't vanish into the world of politics or fame. He stayed grounded. He spent his mornings in court and his evenings mentoring students, most of them kids who reminded him of himself, underestimated, overlooked, and burning with untapped brilliance. He launched a nonprofit called Clause 43.7, named after the very statute he used as a teen to defend his right to speak. It offered free legal education workshops in schools across the country, taught by real attorneys and judges. Within 3 years, over 500 schools had adopted the program. And the impact? Measurable. Graduation rates went up. Youth arrests went down. Students who once feared the justice system began to see it as a tool, not a weapon. One of those students, a girl named Layla from Baton Rouge, later went on to argue a case before the state Supreme Court, at 19. When asked who inspired her, she didn't hesitate. Jamal Richardson, she said. He proved you don't need a suit to be heard. You just need the right words. But even with all the honors, the honorary degrees, the Person of the Year awards, the invitations to speak at global summits, Jamal remained humble. He still lived in his childhood neighborhood. Still drove the same used sedan he bought in college. Still volunteered at the same library where he'd first read through dusty legal codes under flickering lights. And then came the day he returned to the courtroom where it all started. It had been renovated since then, sleek benches, digital displays, state-of-the-art everything. But as Jamal stood inside, staring at the very bench where he was once silenced, the memories came rushing back. The doubt. The fear. And then, the moment he found his voice. He gave a speech that day. Not to a crowd of elites or reporters, but to a group of local middle schoolers on a field trip. Some of you might think the law isn't for people like you, he said gently. But let me tell you something. It is. The law isn't about how loud you are. It's about how right you are. Learn the rules, and then use them. That's how you change the game. When the tour ended, one boy hung back. Quiet, sharp-eyed, holding a notebook just like Jamal once had. "Do you think I could be a judge one day?" the boy asked softly. Jamal smiled. "No," he said. "I know you can." He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, then looked around the courtroom one last time. It wasn't just a place where cases were heard. It was the place where he had first learned that knowing your worth and knowing the law could be one and the same. And now, he had made sure that door would stay open, for every kid who ever walked into a room and was told to sit down. Jamal never had to shout to make history. He just stood tall, stayed sharp, and never backed down when the law was on his side.